The sun hung lazily in the Los Angeles sky as Barron Trump, still a teenager but already accustomed to the public's gaze, walked through the doors of LA Terrace. It was a day meant for quiet reflection, a break from the constant attention and hustle that came with being part of the Trump family. At just 18, Barron had already seen and experienced more than many of his peers. But today, he was simply a young man looking to enjoy a meal in peace. He wore his MAGA hat with ease, not to provoke, but as a symbol of his own beliefs. As he entered the upscale restaurant, Barron's presence was immediately noticeable, but not for the reasons you might think. While the restaurant was known for its sophistication, its exclusive clientele, and the polished decor, Barron's bright red hat stood out among the well-dressed patrons. His casual attire contrasted sharply with the opulence around him, but he wasn't bothered. This was his usual spot, a place where he could quietly sit and escape the noise of his family's fame. The waitstaff and the other patrons were polite, respectful, but Barron couldn't help but feel the weight of the curious eyes that subtly followed him. He shrugged it off, focusing on the menu in front of him as he scanned for his favorite dish. Within minutes, though, the peaceful atmosphere shattered. The manager, a man in his mid-40s with a sharp suit and an air of authority, appeared at Barron's table. Barron sensed the change before he even spoke. The manager's face was tight, his jaw set in a way that suggested this wasn't a casual greeting. "Excuse me, sir," the manager said, his voice rising slightly to draw attention. "We have a policy against political apparel here. I'm going to have to ask you to remove your hat." Barron's brow furrowed as he looked up, surprised by the request. He had visited LA Terrace many times before, enjoying its ambience and exceptional service, but never had his choice of attire been questioned. He had worn the hat to express a part of himself, not to provoke or challenge anyone. Still, his calm demeanor remained, even as the manager's words struck him with an unexpected sharpness. "I wasn't aware of any such policy," Barron replied quietly, his voice steady but firm. There was no anger in his tone, just the kind of genuine curiosity that comes when someone is blindsided by an unexpected situation. The manager, undeterred, gestured vaguely toward the entrance of the restaurant. "It's written in our code of conduct," he insisted. "We want to maintain a neutral space for all our guests." Barron glanced around, noticing a few pairs of eyes shifting toward him, some pretending not to notice the conversation, others more openly watching. The attention felt heavier now, but Barron kept his cool, unsure of how to respond. It wasn't that he was trying to make a scene. He had simply come to enjoy a meal. "I'm not trying to cause any trouble," Barron said after a moment. "I'm just here for lunch." But the manager's stance remained rigid. "I'm afraid you'll need to take the hat off, or I'll have to ask you to leave." A brief silence hung in the air as Barron considered his options. The quiet hum of the restaurant seemed to grow louder in his ears, and a subtle sense of unease crept in. The message was clear: either comply or leave. Barron stood slowly, his movements deliberate. He didn't want to escalate the situation, but he also wasn't going to back down from something he felt was unfair. With a single nod, he picked up his belongings and stood, pushing back his chair as he left the table behind. His untouched glass of water remained, a symbol of a moment interrupted before it could even truly begin. The door closed softly behind him as he walked out, leaving the restaurant in an awkward, uncomfortable silence. For Barron, the disappointment lingered far longer than any frustration or anger. He hadn't expected this kind of treatment, especially not in a place that was supposed to offer peace and luxury. As he stepped out into the warm California air, his fingers tightened around the brim of his hat, adjusting it slightly as he reaffirmed his choice to wear it. He was disappointed, but more than that, he felt the sting of being judged for something as simple as a hat. He didn't want to make a public spectacle of it, so he walked down the street, finding a bench in a nearby park. Pulling out his phone, he quickly sent a message to his mother, explaining what had happened. Then, he texted a few close friends. He wasn't looking for sympathy, but some clarity. Was he in the wrong? Was the manager justified in asking him to remove his hat? Within minutes, replies began flooding in, each message more supportive than the last. One friend wrote, "That's insane. No one should treat you like that." Another added, "You handled it way better than I would have." But amidst all the support, one message caught Barron's attention. A friend suggested he turn the situation into something positive. Why not use this as an opportunity to foster dialogue, to bring people together instead of continuing the cycle of division? It was an idea that sparked something in Barron. He wasn't interested in revenge or public drama. He wanted to find a way to make a real impact. Instead of letting the incident sit as a negative story, why not turn it into a positive one? He made a few phone calls, determined to create something that would not only shift the conversation but bring people together. Back at LA Terrace, the manager was beginning to feel the weight of his actions. Word of the incident spread quickly, and social media lit up with differing opinions. Some praised the manager for standing by his policies, while others questioned the fairness of the decision. The once quiet restaurant was buzzing with the fallout, and the manager couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, he had made the wrong call. As Barron organized a public fundraiser, a way to promote unity and understanding, the tension inside the restaurant continued to rise. Regular customers canceled their reservations, and the place that had once been the epitome of luxury now seemed disconnected. The very neutrality the manager had hoped to preserve quickly unraveling. By the time the fundraiser took shape, Barron's plan was in full motion. He set it up just outside LA Terrace, using the location as a symbol, transforming what had been a moment of conflict into something that encouraged dialogue and connection. By midday, the event was in full swing, with food trucks, live music, and booths from local charities creating a vibrant, unifying atmosphere. Barron stood on the stage, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Yesterday, I was asked to leave a restaurant because of a hat. That's okay. I respect their policies, even if I don't agree with them. But what struck me wasn't just being turned away. It was the bigger picture. We've become so quick to judge each other, to take sides, to shut down conversations. That's not who we are. We can do better." As the crowd cheered, the restaurant manager watched from afar. He had not expected Barron's calm, graceful response to the incident. Something about the event outside pulled at him, and for the first time, he questioned his decision. It was then that the realization hit him. The true value of a place like LA Terrace wasn't in its exclusivity, but in how it treated its patrons, regardless of their appearance or background. As the day wore on, Barron's fundraiser became a symbol of what could happen when people chose understanding over division. And though the manager remained inside, Barron had already taught him a valuable lesson. True luxury wasn't in appearances, it was in the way we treat one another. Barron looked up at the manager, his face registering surprise, but not the anger that might have been expected. He had dined at LA Terrace before and knew well the kind of exclusive environment the restaurant was known for. Yet this felt different. This wasn't the usual kind of interaction he had come to expect. Calmly, he responded, "I wasn't aware of any policy like that." His voice was steady, betraying no frustration despite the pressure mounting. The manager, however, was insistent, his body language stiffening with every word. "It's written in our code of conduct," he declared. His finger pointed in the direction of the entrance, as if to underline the gravity of the situation. "We want to ensure this is a neutral space for all of our guests." Barron looked around the room, feeling the subtle shift in atmosphere. He noticed the glances exchanged among the nearby diners, some of them curious, others more overtly judgmental, but he refused to let it affect him. His posture remained straight, composed. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said, his tone quiet and respectful. He placed the menu aside, showing no interest in further escalating the situation. "I'm just here for lunch." But the manager wasn't budging. His voice became firmer, more authoritative. "Take off the hat, or I'll have to ask you to leave." The ultimatum hung in the air between them. Barron's eyes flicked from the manager to the room around him, his mind weighing the request. He had always been taught to stand firm in his beliefs, but he knew this wasn't about the hat. It was about respect and understanding. It was about how others saw him and, more importantly, how they judged him based on the symbol he wore. A few moments passed in silence before Barron slowly stood up, his chair scraping softly against the polished floor. He didn't say another word, but the weight of the manager's demands felt heavy on his chest. With deliberate calm, he picked up his belongings, leaving the untouched glass of water behind. The atmosphere in the restaurant shifted immediately. Murmurs spread through the staff and diners alike, and the tension that had been building was now palpable. Outside, Barron paused for a moment before walking further down the street. The sun's warmth touched his face, a contrast to the cool tension he had left behind. He adjusted his MAGA hat as though reaffirming his choice, but there was no satisfaction in the gesture. Instead, it was the quiet feeling of disappointment that filled him. This wasn't how he was raised. He was taught to treat everyone with respect, even in moments of disagreement. But here, in this situation, he felt a sense of betrayal, not from anyone else, but from a system that was supposed to value all kinds of people, no matter their background or beliefs. Inside the restaurant, the situation continued to unfold. Staff members were still trying to come to terms with the public confrontation. One of the waiters, who had been watching the whole exchange from the corner of the room, approached the manager cautiously. He spoke softly, as if uncertain of how the manager would react. "Do you think that was a good idea? That's Barron Trump." The manager's face tightened at the mention of Barron's name. He hadn't recognized him until the last moment, and now, the realization hit him. Barron Trump, the very same Barron Trump that had caused a stir when he entered the restaurant earlier. The manager's stomach churned with unease, the weight of his decision beginning to settle in. He hadn't made a mistake out of malice, but in his desire to maintain the neutral space he so fiercely believed in, he might have overstepped. The rules had always been the rules. No political apparel, no exceptions. But now, in the face of this unexpected reality, the manager began to question whether he had gone too far. Barron's calm exit was now playing over in his mind like a reel he couldn't turn off. He couldn't help but replay the moment, the words hanging in the air. "Take off the hat, or I'll have to ask you to leave." Did it really have to be that way? Was it worth losing the potential goodwill of a customer, no matter who they were, just to uphold an arbitrary policy? The restaurant's ethos, its mission to maintain exclusivity, was beginning to clash with its image of offering a welcoming, neutral space for all. Meanwhile, Barron walked a few blocks, processing the chain of events. He had been given an ultimatum for something as innocuous as a red hat, but he was determined not to let that dictate his next move. In a quiet public park, Barron sat down on a bench, pulling out his phone. He quickly sent a message to his mother, letting her know what had just transpired. Then, he reached out to a few close friends, seeking advice not in the form of sympathy, but in the hope of gaining perspective. Was he overreacting? Was the manager justified? The responses came in quick succession, most of them agreeing with Barron's sentiment. "That's insane," one friend wrote. "No one should treat you like that." Another added, "You handled it better than I would have." But Barron wasn't interested in fanning the flames of controversy. He wasn't seeking revenge, but something more constructive, more impactful. This wasn't about causing a spectacle. It was about making something good come from a situation that had quickly escalated into something ugly. With clarity emerging in his mind, Barron began making calls. He wasn't looking to get back at the restaurant or its staff. He wanted to bring attention to a larger issue, a lack of understanding, a lack of compassion, and a growing divide in society. What if he could use this moment to foster dialogue, not just for himself, but for everyone involved? Instead of letting the incident define him, Barron envisioned a way to shift the focus toward unity and community. What if the restaurant's divisiveness could be turned into something positive? As Barron formulated his plan, the story of his ejection began spreading across social media. Posts and comments flooded in, some expressing outrage, others questioning the fairness of the manager's actions. By the time Barron returned to his apartment, his quiet lunch had become a focal point for something much larger than himself. But Barron wasn't interested in feeding the anger. He began organizing a public fundraiser, a community event designed to encourage people to come together, to break down the barriers of judgment and create a space for open conversation. The fundraiser would be held outside LA Terrace, symbolizing the message of unity Barron hoped to convey. He reached out to several organizations focused on fostering community understanding, and soon enough, the plans began to take shape. The next day, Barron's vision came to life. The block outside LA Terrace was filled with food trucks, live music, and booths for local charities. It was a celebration of community, not division, and by midday, the crowd had begun to gather. Barron took to the stage, his voice steady but filled with emotion, as he addressed the crowd. "Yesterday, I was asked to leave a restaurant because of a hat. I respect their policies, even if I don't agree with them. But what struck me wasn't just being turned away. It was the bigger picture. We've become so quick to judge each other, to take sides, to shut down conversations. But that's not who we are. We can do better." The crowd erupted in applause, and Barron continued, "This event is not about me. It's about all of us finding ways to listen, to understand, and to come together. The funds we raise today will go toward programs that foster dialogue and inclusion. Thank you for being here and proving that unity is stronger than division." Inside the restaurant, the manager was beginning to feel the full weight of his decision. Word of the fundraiser spread quickly, and as the event grew in size, a few of the restaurant's regular customers canceled their reservations, while some of the staff stepped outside to join the crowd. The tension inside the restaurant was palpable, the atmosphere charged with the realization that something important was happening just outside its doors. As the fundraiser reached its peak, Barron's poise and message had caught the attention of even those who had initially judged him. And though the manager had made his mistake, Barron had turned it into an opportunity, a moment to show that even in the face of division, kindness, understanding, and unity could prevail. The manager, brushing off the waiter's concern with a wave of his hand, muttered, "We can't make exceptions. This is my restaurant, and I run it as I see fit." But even as he said the words, there was an unease settling in his stomach. Barron's calm exit, the quiet dignity with which he left, seemed to echo in his mind. It wasn't the defiance that troubled the manager, but the way Barron had handled the entire situation, without anger, without any sign of resistance. It lingered in the manager's thoughts long after Barron had stepped out, and that seed of doubt began to grow. Outside, Barron stood still for a moment, letting the warm California sunlight fall over him as he reflected. He wasn't seeking sympathy, nor was he angry. He felt disappointment, something deeper than frustration. He reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone and texting his mother, letting her know what had just happened. Then, he sent messages to a few close friends, just a quick note, explaining the situation. Within moments, the replies started pouring in, a mix of disbelief and support. One of his friends' responses stood out, more than the others. "That's insane. You handled it way better than I would have. But hey, don't let this fester. Turn this into something good." Barron's mind started to shift. Rather than letting the incident leave him with bitterness, he began thinking about how he could turn it into something positive. He wasn't interested in revenge or a public showdown. He wanted something more meaningful. He thought about his words, the discussions around him, the divisiveness that seemed to be creeping into every corner of society. Could this be an opportunity to promote unity, to foster a space where people could come together and connect? Determined, Barron began making calls. He wasn't interested in causing further division. He wanted to create something constructive, something that could bring people from all walks of life together. His idea started to take shape quickly. He envisioned a public fundraiser, an event dedicated to supporting underprivileged communities. But it wasn't just about raising money. It was about creating safe spaces for dialogue, connection, and understanding. He wanted to take what had been a negative moment and transform it into something that could build bridges, not walls. The following morning, as the streets outside LA Terrace began to come alive, Barron's vision started to take root. Food trucks lined the streets, their colorful signs enticing passers-by. Music spilled out into the air, setting a vibrant backdrop for the event. Volunteers moved quickly, setting up booths for local charities, creating an atmosphere of unity and community. Banners with bold, powerful words, "United we stand," fluttered in the breeze, a message that spoke to the heart of Barron's mission. By midday, the crowd had gathered, People came from all corners of the city, drawn not just by curiosity but by the message Barron was spreading. There were families, young professionals, activists, and even some familiar faces from social media who had come to witness the gathering. Barron stood at the center, his calm presence grounding the energy around him. He wasn't commanding attention in the way some might expect, but his quiet confidence drew people in. His thoughts were focused on the bigger picture, the message that had brought everyone here today. As the crowd grew, Barron took to the stage, his voice clear and steady as he addressed those gathered before him. Yesterday, I was asked to leave a restaurant because of a hat. I respect their policies, even if I don't agree with them. But what struck me wasn't just being turned away. It was the bigger picture. We've become so quick to judge one another, so quick to take sides, to shut down conversations before they even begin. But that's not who we are. We are better than this. We can do better. The crowd erupted in applause, their energy and enthusiasm palpable. Barron's message had resonated deeply. This event, he continued, isn't about me. It's not about the restaurant. It's about all of us coming together, finding ways to listen to one another, to understand one another, no matter our differences. The funds we raise today will go toward programs that foster dialogue, inclusion, and community. Thank you for being here today and for showing that unity is stronger than division. The applause grew louder, and Barron stepped off the stage, shaking hands with attendees, thanking them for their support. His demeanor was unassuming but warm, and people responded to him with a genuine appreciation. Many who had come out of curiosity left feeling inspired by the message of connection and community. Inside LA Terrace, however, the scene was different. The manager stood by the window, watching the event unfold outside. He hadn't expected Barron to respond this way, and the sight of the vibrant community event made him feel conflicted. What had seemed like a small, personal decision to enforce a policy had spiraled into something far bigger. Staff members had begun to drift outside, pulled by the music and the positive energy that seemed to radiate from the fundraiser. The manager's gaze softened as he watched them, some of his longtime employees stepping out to join the crowd, some just watching from a distance. The silence inside the restaurant was unnerving, a stark contrast to the liveliness outside. A waiter who had been there the day before approached the manager quietly. "You should go out there," he suggested softly. "Talk to him." The manager stiffened, his jaw tightening. "This isn't my fight," he replied, but his tone lacked the conviction it once held. Deep down, he knew he was grappling with more than just a policy. He was questioning the essence of what he had done. The waiter didn't push, but the suggestion lingered in the air. The manager retreated to his office, closing the door behind him. But even there, he couldn't escape the growing realization that something important was happening just outside his restaurant. As the day wore on, the event outside continued to grow in both size and impact. The energy was contagious. People of all backgrounds came together to support the cause, engaging with one another, sharing stories, and learning from each other. It wasn't just a fundraiser, it was a movement, a gathering that transcended political lines and social divides. The message was clear: unity, understanding, and respect were the true luxuries that society needed. Inside, the manager's phone buzzed with notifications. Emails flooded in, some from angry patrons, others questioning his decision. His resolve was weakening. The tension that had gripped him earlier was now replaced by a sense of regret. Was the policy really about neutrality, or had it been a form of division? The lines had blurred, and the weight of his choices was now undeniable. Meanwhile, Barron remained focused, his presence calm but powerful. He knew this wasn't just about him or the hat. It was about the collective good. By turning this incident into something positive, Barron had shifted the conversation. What had begun as a moment of division had blossomed into an opportunity for connection and growth. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a golden glow over the crowd, the manager made his way outside. His heart was heavy with uncertainty, but there was something in the atmosphere, in the way people were coming together, that he couldn't ignore. Maybe this event had shown him something he had missed: the importance of building bridges, not walls. And so, with a deep breath, He approached Barron, stepping into the crowd. It wasn't too late to make things right. As Barron stepped up to the microphone, his demeanor calm yet filled with purpose, he addressed the crowd with a clarity that resonated deeply. "Yesterday, I was asked to leave a restaurant because of a hat," he began, pausing for a moment to let the weight of the words settle in. "And that's okay. I respect their policies, even if I don't agree with them. But what struck me wasn't just being turned away. It was the bigger picture. We've become so quick to judge each other, to take sides, to shut down conversations before they even begin. That's not who we are. We can do better." The crowd, already engaged by his sincerity, erupted into applause, their energy palpable. Barron continued, his voice steady but heartfelt. "This event isn't about me. It's not about them. It's about all of us finding ways to listen, to understand, and to come together. The funds we raise today will go toward programs that foster dialogue, inclusion, and, most importantly, empathy." Inside LA Terrace, the restaurant's manager stood by the window, his gaze fixed on the scene unfolding outside. He had expected Barron to react with frustration or bitterness, but instead, the young man had chosen to approach the situation with grace and calm. Some of the staff, drawn by the vibrant music and positive energy outside, had slipped away from their duties to join the event, and even the manager felt a tug of conflict within himself. The buzz outside felt like a breath of fresh air compared to the still, growing tension inside his restaurant. The manager's phone buzzed incessantly as the restaurant's social media pages were flooded with responses. Some praised Barron for his maturity and composure, admiring how he had turned what could have been a conflict into something meaningful. Others, however, were less kind, calling for boycotts and accusing the restaurant of intolerance. The once bustling dining room had quieted, with several reservations canceled, and the few patrons who remained seemed distracted, glancing outside toward the event, unsure whether to stay or join the growing crowd. The manager scrolled through the comments, a knot tightening in his stomach. Some were supportive, but the backlash from others stung. The more he read, the more he realized that his decision was unraveling, not just in the eyes of Barron, but in the eyes of many others. It wasn't simply about a policy anymore. It was about a choice that had made people question the values the restaurant supposedly stood for. As the evening wore on, Barron's fundraiser reached new heights, not just in the funds raised, but in the impact it had on those who attended. The event became a living testament to what happens when people come together in the spirit of unity, choosing understanding over judgment. The diverse group of people gathered there was a reflection of Barron's message, fostering connections, creating safe spaces for open dialogue, and letting go of the divisions that so often tear people apart. Inside the restaurant, the manager found himself deep in thought, replaying Barron's words over and over in his mind. Maybe the true measure of a restaurant wasn't just in its policies or the celebrities it hosted. Maybe it was in how it treated all its customers, regardless of their appearance, background, or what they were wearing. The realization hit him hard. His policies had served to protect the brand's image, but they had failed to protect something more important, the respect and dignity every person deserved. The manager glanced outside once more, watching the event unfold, and for the first time, he began to see things differently. The lesson Barron had delivered so gracefully, the lesson about listening, understanding, and truly connecting with people, was one he had missed. It wasn't just Barron's actions that had changed the course of the day. It was the shift in perspective that had occurred. The true spirit of hospitality was about inclusivity, about making every guest feel valued, no matter their background or how they looked. As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden glow across the event, the manager made a decision. He knew he had to make things right. The tension in his chest loosened as he realized that there was still time to reflect and change, to make amends and support the very values that Barron had championed. Outside, Barron continued to engage with attendees, shaking hands, listening to their stories, and offering encouragement. His demeanor was calm, but his words carried weight. He had transformed a potentially negative situation into something far more significant, an opportunity to change the conversation, to inspire a movement that focused on coming together. not tearing apart. The event was a resounding success, raising not only funds but awareness about the importance of empathy and communication. Barron had ignited a conversation, challenged assumptions, and, in the process, brought people together in a way that went beyond a mere fundraiser.